Well, we're going to see. Look, Harvard has been a disaster. They've taken $5 billion plus. $5 billion. Nobody knew that they were making this kind. If we didn't do this, we would have never found this out, Pam. They're taking $5 billion. And I'd rather see that money go to trade schools. And by the way, they're totally anti-Semitic at Harvard, as you know, and some other colleges, too, in all fairness to them. And it's been exposed, very exposed.
Okay, let's unpack this. What if I told you, a pretty simple question about college student visas could just explode into this whole conversation?
You mean covering things like university endowments, billions of dollars, accusations of anti-Semitism?
Exactly. And proposals to shift huge amounts of money to trade schools, touching on the economy, even like a specific criminal trial.
It sounds like quite a ride. But yeah, that's basically the journey we're mapping out today. Our source is excerpts from a YouTube video transcript, just one discussion.
And it all started, apparently, from that question about resuming interviews for foreign student visas.
That's right. Seems straightforward enough.
So our mission here, it's really important to state this up front. We're not here to judge or agree or disagree with any of the claims in this clip.
Nope. Our job really is just to act as guides for you. We're going to meticulously chart out what was said,
pulling out the specific points, the numbers mentioned, the anecdotes shared, and trying to understand the connections the speaker made, within this one discussion.
Think of it like we're creating a map of the information presented in this particular source. We're just presenting to you the content and the flow, exactly as it was laid out by the speaker.
Okay, so let's dive in, right at that starting point. That question about foreign student visas, because like you said, the conversation took a sharp turn almost immediately.
It really did. The initial question was about resuming those visa interviews for colleges. And bang, the discussion pivots straight to Harvard University.
And not just Harvard, but a pretty strong opening statement. The claim was, right off the bat, that Harvard has been a disaster.
Yeah, that phrase definitely sets a critical tone for everything that follows about the university in this source.
So from there, the source goes into Harvard's finances, or at least how they're presented in this clip.
Right. Specific figures get mentioned pretty quickly. The source states Harvard has a $52 billion endowment.
$52 billion. And adds the claim that Harvard, quote, got a lot of that from the United States.
But maybe the most striking financial claim, the one that seems really central, is this assertion about a discovery.
Oh, yeah.
That Harvard was apparently making, or taking, the source, uses both words, $5 billion plus, and this is key, nobody knew that they were making.
Wow. Okay, so this $5 billion figure is presented as some kind of hidden profit or gain.
That seems to be the implication in the source. And right after mentioning that discovery, the speaker proposes an idea.
Which was?
They said they would rather see that money go to trade schools.
Interesting. So a direct link between this alleged $5 billion and funding trade schools.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about gains. The source also talks about financial losses for Harvard.
Right. I remember that. They mentioned specific numbers again.
Yeah, claiming Harvard loses $250 million every time they, quote, fight, and that they found another $100 million lost just yesterday.
Those are very specific, very round numbers, used to emphasize, it seems, the cost of whatever Harvard is perceived to be doing.
Seems so. And that idea, redirecting funds, leads straight into this big focus on trade schools.
Yeah, that felt like a really core part of the argument presented. Trade schools as an alternative, or maybe an addition, to universities like Harvard.
Mm-hmm. The suggestion was that with money like that claimed $5 billion, you could create, and this is a direct quote, the best trade schools anywhere in the world.
Part of the problem with Harvard is that there are about 31%, almost 31% of foreigners coming to Harvard. We give them billions of dollars, which is ridiculous. We do grants, which we're probably not going to be doing much grants anymore to Harvard. But they're 31%, but they refuse to tell us who the people are. We want to know who the people. Now, a lot of the foreign students we wouldn't have a problem with. I'm not going to have a problem with foreign students. But it shouldn't be 31%. It's too much because we have Americans that want to go there and to other places, and they can't go there because you have 31% foreign. Now, no foreign government contributes money to Harvard. We do. So why are they doing so many? Number one. Number two, we want a list of those foreign students, and we'll find out whether or not they're okay. Many will be okay, I assume. And I assume with Harvard, many will be bad. And then the other thing is they're very anti-Semitic. Everybody knows they're anti-Semitic, and that's got to stop immediately.
And the source even suggested locations.
It did mention Iowa, Indiana,
Yeah.
describe them as lots of good states, well-run states, places to potentially build these model schools.
And the money would have strings attached.
Explicitly, the source says the money can only be used for trade schools, period.
What kind of skills did they envision these schools teaching?
A mix, actually, both traditional and very modern. Things like how to build motors and cars and AI.
Motors, cars, and AI. Okay. And the source claimed this idea had support.
Yeah, stated that everyone's coming up saying, we love the idea of trade schools. So presenting it as a popular concept.
Okay, so that's the financial angle and the trade school push. But the discussion also shifted, didn't it, towards anti-Semitism on campuses,
It did. And again, quite direct claims were made.
specifically about Harvard.
Yes. The source flat out states that Harvard is totally anti-Semitic, adding that this has been exposed.
That's a very strong accusation. Did they say it was only Harvard?
No, to be fair, the source did add that this issue applies to some other colleges too.
Okay. And then Columbia University came up as a kind of comparison.
Exactly. Columbia was initially described in similar terms, very, very bad, very anti-Semitic, but then the narrative shifts.
How so?
The source says Columbia is now working with us on finding a solution. And because of this cooperation, Columbia is, quote, taking off that hot seat.
Unlike Harvard.
Unlike Harvard, which is portrayed in the source as still being on that hot seat, apparently due to a lack of cooperation.
Interesting contrast presented there. Okay, let's circle back then to the issue that actually started all this. Foreign students. The source had a lot more to say about that, especially regarding Harvard.
Oh, definitely. It elaborated quite a bit. For instance, a specific statistic was given.
Which was?
The source claims almost 31% of Harvard students are foreign nationals.
31%. And based on that...
A specific cap was proposed. The suggestion was maybe around 15%.
Okay, a cap at 15%. And what were the reasons given in the source for wanting this cap?
Several interconnected reasons were laid out. One was about access for American students, the claim that U.S. students can't get in because these spots are taken by foreign students.
Right, the displacement argument. What else?
A major theme was security, concerns about foreign students being troublemakers or potentially very radical people.
From specific parts of the world?
Yeah, from areas of the world that are very radicalized. That was the phrasing used.
And the desired alternative.
The speaker stated they want foreign students to be people that can love our country. This was tied directly to preventing bad outcomes.
Like what?
Things like preventing shopping centers exploding and the kind of riots that you had, linking student populations to these kinds of security concerns.
So how would they vet students, according to the source?
Well, the idea was floated that they'd want to see their lists, presumably applicant lists, to check where students come from and identify potential troublemakers.
See the lists. Okay, was there an example?
Sort of. A brief anecdote about seeing a nice young man from the UK wanting to go back to Harvard, which immediately prompted the speaker to say they'd need to check his past, even for someone seemingly okay from the UK.
And there was a geopolitical angle, too.
Yeah, a claim that certain countries aren't helping us, which was presented as another reason why maybe students from those places shouldn't get as many spots.
And one more point on the student issue attributing campus troubles.
Right. The source suggested that many of those students involved in unrest were actually troublemakers caused by the radical left lunatics in this country. So placing blame domestically as well.
Okay, quite a lot there on the foreign student angle. Then the focus seemed to shift again, this time to Harvard's academics, or maybe admissions standards.
Yeah, moving from who gets in to how they get in and maybe what happens after. A pretty striking claim was made here.
Which one was that?
The assertion that Harvard announced it would be teaching remedial mathematics.
Remedial math at Harvard.
That's the claim, and they gave a very basic example, like teaching 2 + 2 is 4.
Wow. And the implication drawn from that in the source was?
It led the speaker to ask, basically, if students need that level of math, how on earth did they get admitted to Harvard in the first place?
Posing a direct challenge to their admissions criteria, it sounds like.
Exactly. And this was immediately contrasted with another claim.
About qualified students being rejected.
The source states that people with 1,600 on their boards, presumably meaning perfect or near perfect SATAC scores, don't get in.
And the suggestion to look at the list came up again here.
Yes, mentioned again in the context of this perceived gap between who gets in and who supposedly should get in based on scores.
So you can see how all these threads about Harvard finances, student origins, academics, admissions are woven together in the source's narrative.
Definitely. But the source material wasn't just about universities. It did touch briefly on a couple of other big national topics.
Right, like the economy. There was a quick take on that.
Yeah, pretty confident assessment, actually. The source claimed there's a significant boom happening.
A boom. Based on what?
Well, they cited large figures like $14 trillion in investments, mentioned building AI plants, tangible things.
And what did the source attribute this claimed boom to?
Two main things, it seems. One was anticipated outcomes of the November 5th election. The other was the impact of tremendous tariffs.
Tariffs. Was there a specific example?
Yes, a 50% tariff mentioned on the European Union. The source claimed this forced the EU to negotiate.
Interesting. But they also mentioned criticism.
Noted facing criticism, quote, he was chicken for apparently making more reasonable deals after initially imposing the harsh tariff.
Okay, so a quick snapshot of the economy, according to the source, and then a pretty sharp turn, right? Into a legal matter.
Yeah, quite abrupt. A question came up about pardoning individuals involved in that alleged plot against the Michigan governor.
And the response in the source
Was that the speaker would look at it. Stated they watched the trial and, quote, it looked to me like somewhat of a railroad job.
a railroad job, meaning unfair.
That seems to be the suggestion. Maybe the defendants were unfairly targeted or convicted, perhaps just for saying stupid things while, drinking.
Did the source suggest others felt this way?
Yes, claimed that a lot of people from both sides believed the accused got railroaded in that case.
Okay, so quite a detour there. And then for the final points in the source, it circled back to Harvard.
It did. Kind of wrapping up the thoughts on the ongoing tensions with the university.
How did the source see that ending?
Didn't give a specific prediction, actually. Just said they don't know how it will end, but the message was clear. Harvard needs to, quote, behave themselves.
More strong words. Any other claims about Harvard's position?
Yeah, that the university is currently treating our country with great disrespect, and as a result is getting in deeper and deeper into trouble.
And that idea of Harvard fighting came up again.
Reiterated the view that Harvard is getting their ass kicked because, in this view, they want to fight and show how smart they are.
Unlike Columbia again.
Exactly. Columbia was held up one last time as the contrasting example of the university that chose to cooperate and, as a result, supposedly taking off that hot seat.
But despite all that criticism, how did the source leave things regarding Harvard?
Well, interestingly, after all that, the speaker concluded by stating a desire for Harvard to ultimately do well and be great again.
So a mix of harsh critique and a stated wish for future success.
Pretty much sums up the final take on Harvard in this clip.
So when we step back and look at this map we've just charted for you, it really is something, isn't it? How that one question about student visas just unfolded.
Yeah, it touched on university governance, huge financial sums, the social climate on campus, national security implications, economic policy, even specific legal cases.
It really underscores how, at least from the perspective presented in this source, these seemingly separate issues are all seen as deeply connected, parts of a much larger picture.
And just to reiterate for everyone listening, we've really focused only on pulling out and presenting to you the specific points, the claims, the connections as they were made within this single piece of source material.
Exactly. No judgment, just mapping the information. And the source definitely presents these complex things, college admissions, university money, national security, the economy as fundamentally linked.
It does make you think, though. What does that kind of framing imply? If you view the world this way, how does it shape your approach to policy on higher education or international relations?
Right. And if these connections are drawn, what other, perhaps unexpected links might someone see between issues we usually think of as totally separate? Definitely leaves you with some things to chew on based on just this one discussion.